England had an honest conversation with themselves at the end of the last test.
This is the last knock. My dad told me to say this.
In fact, that is unfair. This may not be their worst batting lineup of all time, although you could certainly argue, but in years where they've had 10 or more tests, this is the worst average per wicket they've ever had. And I can confidently say that they have never been this bad as often in a single year before this. And yet, in those numbers is Joe Root. He currently has the third most runs ever scored in Test match cricket year. He may, if his luck turns, which it doesn't look like it's going to, be able to score enough runs to go to number 2 or even number 1 on this list. Of course, someone would have to stick with him, and that seems almost impossible at this point. Let me put it this way. Root averages 62 this year. The rest of the England batting lineup combined averages 19. There is no way around this. They have had one batter all year, and he has been absolutely incredible. And the rest of the batters have been as bad as he is good. And this is how many runs Root has made this year, and how many the other England players have. It's so nice. I made it in a variety of graphs to really fully illustrate it, because this is just very funny and remarkable. Root has been awesome just at the time that England batting has become the worst. I mean, just completely shithouse on a level that is barely believable. It's like setting your car on fire, then getting into it to drive to the shops, but then realizing you forgot your wallet as you slowly burn to death. And when I put this pie chart up on Twitter, someone asked me about extras. And I hadn't even considered them. Why would you? Shall we look at where extras comes in on this list? I mark it as 407 sundries scored while England's been batting this year. That would make extras England's third top scorer, with over 6% of their runs. I mean, what do you even do with information like that? This shows that England have chopped and changed and used horses and courses and rested players and planned and tried to get it all right. Only none of that matters because only Joe Root can bat. And one thing you hear with Stokes is, well, he's a better player than his average. I think that's fair. He certainly improved as a batter over the last few years. And he probably played earlier than a batter of his talent might have normally just because of his all-round skill. So his overall record is low for that reason. And last 3 years, he averages 42. Before that, he was a lot worse. But let's just say he really is a 42 average guy. That's it. That's your second best batter, 42. That's still low for a major nation. And who's third? It's currently Johnny Bairstow, although it does switch around quite a bit. And he last made 100 in 2018. That was so long ago. That was before people knew how to wash their hands correctly. But really, no one is their best third. No one in England can make consistent runs because they have tried pretty much everyone. So the obvious thing is to get new blood into the team. So let's look at their batters who've made a debut in the last 6 years compared to the average of top 6 batters around the world. That average is only 35, by the way. It's pretty low. It's been a tough era to bat. But it's also been a lot tougher for the English. Folk scored a lot of his in one innings. Burns has made 3 tough hundreds and has had a bunch of failures. And Milan seems like a near Aussie specialist at this point. And I've now concluded this section with the players who average over 30. This list has grizzled vets and county pros, young prodigies and white ball stars. They've tried a lot, and a lot has failed. And the players who have dominated county cricket during that period are Gary Ballance, who seems to have finally been discarded for good. And the other guys are Ollie Pope and Johnny Bairstow. And in this test, Bairstow has come in for Pope. Do you see what's happening here? And if you could hear that in the background, that was my daughter crying, because she's heard these stats so many times now, she just cries every time she hears them. A little bit of grass on the wicket is good, but too much and all hell breaks loose. Not enough and things can go sideways very quick. The same is true of your pubic hair. And you don't have a groundsman who smells like fertilizer telling you what to do. No, you are the curator of your own pubic pitch. So if you're having trouble grooming your pitch, what about Manscaped? They've invented a sleek, well-designed, optimized trimmer that helps you shave your balls. I've used it, and it's incredible. It's good enough to use at Lord's. So get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code REDINKA. And you just put that in at manscaped.com. That's 20% off, free worldwide shipping, manscaped.com. The code is REDINKA. I always thought this podcast took balls more seriously than anyone else. Then I tried Manscaped. Recently on a wagon wheel, someone asked me about Jake Libby, Joe Clark and Liam Livingston. Libby's a 28-year-old on his third county. He's averaged 56 for Worcestershire in the last couple of years, but he also averaged 24 over 5 seasons for Nottingham. Clark switched the other way and went from Worcester to Notts. And for them, he's averaged 33 over the last few seasons. And finally, you have Liam Livingston, who is probably the most naturally talented batter England haven't tried yet. He came into the 2020 season averaging 41 in first-class cricket. Since then, the IPL has become a focus for him, and in his last 8 matches, he's averaged 12. When it comes down to it, all 3 of these guys average under 40. There's no saviours here. And that's how you end up with Zach Crawley in your team. He has an average of 31 in first-class cricket. That's how bad this has got. They basically felt like they had tried everyone else, and this guy had gone around the world to set himself up to be a test player by learning how to handle high pace and spin. He looks fairly pretty, and everyone else was already bad, so they gave him the gig. But he's been averaging 12, and there must be a serious concern at one point that they are actually ruining someone who might actually go on to be a very good player. Crawley has bad form, no consistent runs ever, and has been pulled off the bench basically because he's warm-blooded. And then I want to point out 2 brilliant things about the series. I don't think Dawid Malan or Hasib Hamid were supposed to be here. Hamid came into the 11 when they finally gave up on Don Sibley, and he's a great story, and there's obviously some talent there. But he also plays with low hands. Australia is not a place you want to play with low hands, because of all the bounce. And then there's Malan, who also came into the side against India with the hope that he could make it work like he hadn't the first time he was in Tests. And he actually looks fairly well suited to Australian conditions, and this isn't the first time. So far, he's been twice as good in Australia as he has been everywhere else. And sure, Lyon might clean him up a few times, and he's still got that angle bat outside off stump that's a target. Or when the bowlers get tired, he can score. But here's my thing about these selections. Did they mean to pick these 2 players? Or were they simply in the 11 at the time? And so they ended up here. Now, Malan has been fantastic for them in the series so far. He has almost as many runs as Root, but Hamid has not. And it's hard to see how Sibley would not have been a better option for Australian conditions. And after all that planning, is it possible they went with these 2 guys just because they were the ones still standing during the last summer? And that's what makes all this talk of mindsets and tactics so funny. There is no magic way to fix 5 batters by talking about the fourth stump or positive intent. There was a feeling before this test that they just needed to attack more. I don't know how anyone thought that would change anything. That is simply finding another way to fail, as many England batters proved today. The problem isn't mindset or desire or any of the buzzwords people fire out at times like this. The issue here is that none of them can bat. And they have proved that innings after innings. This isn't because they were in Australia. We have seen them not be able to bat in other continents. I mean, they can't bat at home. This isn't a new thing. They've struggled a lot. They've averaged over 35 runs per wicket twice in 9 years. 4 times they've been under 30. They've not made consistent runs in a long time. Now, obviously, it's not just their batting that has caused them problems in Australia specifically. Jofra Archer's injury has played a part. There has been which also had something to do with their bizarre selection. But there is also no spin choice they can make because they just don't have an option for Australia. And while their batters have been worse than their bowlers, when you factor in the drops, the difference between the 2 is even more stark than how it looks on the scoreboard. And so with all this, Chris Silverwood is under pressure. Mike Atherton talked about how he has too much power and also questioned whether the players would still want to play for Silverwood going forward. The same newspaper, The Times, and it's quite an important newspaper, I suppose. But I want to be really clear on this. The greatest coach or player manager in the world, I don't care if you get some sort of mutant version of Alex Ferguson and Red Auerbach. There is no amount of man management or technical advice that any human being could do to make this a consistent run-scoring team. Hell, I don't care if you're MS Dhoni, Johnny Cash, or the Dalai Lama. No one can take a batting lineup of this many flawed players and make them a much better lineup. They are what they are. They might have series of 2 where it works, and they'll be bailed out by their all-rounders and bowlers because that is their strength. And of course, Joe Root will win some with a mountain of runs because that's what he does. But this is not a team good at batting. What coach could turn 5 batting spots that can't average 35 between them into a good team? Silverwood didn't coach their techniques into them. He inherited a batting lineup where every player has multiple failures. We're not talking about refining working methods here. We're looking at taking players who have never made big runs domestically or batters who have struggled at international level for a long time and making them into proper batters. Is there a magic pill I don't know about? Have you ever heard the phrase, shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic? Well, this is actually more like shuffling which venomous snake you want to lie on as the boat is sinking. If you want to say Silverwood could do more, sure, knock yourself out. But unless he's an actual faith healer, there is nothing he could do to fix the problems of broken batting that started well before he took over. And let's be honest, as it looks at the moment, are going to be around far after he's fired. And it's not just Silverwood under the pump. Joe Root was asked if he's running a dictatorship. I mean, what is happening here? Even if you're one of those people that believes that captaincy matters more than anything else in cricket, you could get 100 Mike Brearleys working on this England batting lineup for 100 years, and they'd still end up with little more than a frown emoji. The only thing Root can do right now is make enough runs that the rest of his team's failures don't matter. And you can see from this handy graph I made you, when he has done that, England have won 4 of the 6 tests he's made 100 in. And that's all that's left, isn't it? I mean, essentially, he can be slightly more aggressive, he can yell at people, he can do funky fields. He just needs to make a lot of runs and hope occasionally his bowlers back him up. Because in this year, when Root has scored more runs than any England player ever has in a year, and the third most of any human ever, on those very same pitches, his top 7 batters who aren't him average a combined 22.6. The problem isn't the Australian bowlers, the coach, captain, or even the selectors. It's the batting. Because at a certain point, England needs to work out what happened to their batting and also what on earth they could do to try and fix it. I mean, it starts with honesty, but I think it's a lot more than that.